Okay, good afternoon everyone, and welcome to the Cleaner Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Can I go through agenda item 1, welcome and attendance. We've had apologies from Councillor Hugh Bevan, Councillor Fiona Cross, Councillor Alan Jones, Councillor John Marshall, Councillor Stuart Evans, Councillor Brian Morby, Councillor Wayne Tomlinson, Mr Gwyn Smith and Mr Alan Williams. Unfortunately, we've had quite a lot of illness, so it's just very unfortunate, but thank you, Councillor Seaborn, Councillor Ashley, for your attendance this afternoon. Item agenda 2, declarations of interest. Can I bring Tim James in, please?
Thank you, Chair. Just to remind members present that if they do have any declarations they'd like to speak to me about, then perhaps they can do so now, and if there are any declarations made, then they should be recorded in the relevant part of the attendance register file that's going around. Any matters you wish to ask me about, members, please?
No, I don't think so. Thank you, Tim.
I didn't anticipate any, Chair, so thank you.
Okay, item number 3, minutes of the meeting held on the 16th of September 2015. They start on page 5 of your agenda, so we just go through them for accuracy. Page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9 and page 10. Any members got any matters arising, or happy to move that they're correct? Okay, thank you. Right, so the minutes are moved. Agenda item 4, action sheet, an update on actions decided at the last meeting. Begin on page they're on pages 11. That's it. Happy to move? Yep, thank you. And right, we go on to agenda item 5, Wales Audit Office review of Council's waste service. Can I welcome Non Jenkins and Chris Pugh? Thank you for coming this afternoon. Would you like to just give a brief? We've all read the report, but if you'd like to give a brief overview, it would be really helpful.
Thank you very much, and thank you for inviting us here today. I suppose just to give a quick context to this work, we undertook the work around this time last year in terms of undertaking the field work. Obviously, we followed up on a few things since, and so we need to remember that that's in that context, and a lot of things have happened since that, as we can see obviously today by the action plan that the officers have put before you for your consideration. So a year ago, and you yourselves obviously had also recognised that you needed to review this service, given that you, the Council, had agreed to undertake a peer review of neighbourhood services. As a division as a whole, we looked specifically at the waste service within the neighbourhood service, and yes, it's a hard-hitting report in terms of, there needed to be a coherent vision. Performance had been mixed. There were some issues in terms of sickness and in terms of the use of agency staff. There was a lot of things to get a grip on, I suppose, and through pulling together an overall vision strategy, which was there but in bits throughout the years. Through pulling all of that together, we can see that you're moving things forward now through the action plan, and I know that you're looking to put a new strategy in place from next year onwards. And most councils at this point in time are looking at their waste services, whether it's for performance matters, if they're struggling to meet the targets required, or whether it's for austerity measures and challenges. So a lot of councils are looking at their waste arrangements at this point in time and how they're undertaking their strategies and also trying different things out. So that's also in this context. And I just wanted to give that high level in terms of that we can see that from last year, yes, it was a hard-hitting. You were where you were last year. There had been issues in the run-up to that kind of led you to this point, but we can see that you're moving things forward now through your action plan. Is that, yeah?
Yeah, thank you for those comments. You've had a copy, obviously you've looked at the action plan. Is there anything which you think should be included in the plan that's not?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think as Nonna's already said, that the action plan puts sort of all of the things in place that we would expect it to see over the last year and sets them out quite clearly. And as Nonna's already said, this piece of work took place largely about a year ago. So from reading the action plan, everything that we sort of expect to see is in there. The Council's addressing the issues, either has already addressed, is in the process of addressing, or setting out an appropriate timeline to do so. And I think that the key point, certainly to reiterate what Non has already said, is around the pulling together of the overarching strategy that essentially will actually help to rectify a lot of any of the outstanding issues by having that overall sort of strategic vision, linking that down through your business, your service and business plans and so on. That will sort of naturally bring all of that together and focus it. So from my point of view, the action plan is there, everything's in place. By bringing it all together now, I think that's an appropriate response. I mean, more broadly, it's probably just worth mentioning that we'll be undertaking a corporate assessment of the Council starting in the new year. We will be looking at sort of generally how the Council responds to things, and that as part of that wider work. But certainly in what we've got here, there's nothing additional really I'd personally expect to see in there.
Councillor Seaborn?
Yeah. It is clear that the introduction of a waste strategy is important, for Torfaen and for all the boroughs. Are you aware of any best practices case you could signpost our officers to?
Yeah, certainly. In terms of the waste strategy, again, just to sort of come back to Non's point, it's a key issue at the moment, and a number of all councils across Wales are looking to develop the strategies, particularly in relation to the Welsh Government targets that are being set, the potential files and so on. So it's very important. And we do acknowledge that you've recognised this now and need to develop that. In terms of sort of best practice, I suppose ultimately all of the councils in Wales are in the process of developing at the moment. So it's possibly worth you sort of speaking to as many councils as you can to see where they are at their sort of stages of development and picking things up from that. From our point of view, providing sort of more information and guidance, we do actually have a waste specialist within the Wales Audit Office. Obviously, we had these questions yesterday. I did have a chance to briefly speak to a colleague, Andy, and I'm going to meet with him on Monday, and he's going to provide some additional information, some signposts, some other bits and pieces. So once we've had that, I can feed that back to you, and also Andy would be happy to speak to you should you want to further from that. I think from our point of view, it's a case of sort of signposting you from the person, the expert in the area. But from your point of view, I think it's about seeking out essentially seeing what others around you are actually doing, and from your point of view, establishing what appears to be good practice or best practice for yourselves, because obviously Torfaen may well be very different to other councils, so it's not necessarily a one size fits all.
And once the information is collated by your colleague, will that be signposted on the web page for everybody to read, or will it just be available to us?
I suppose it's linked to your action plan here, because as part of your action plan, the officers have actually said that they will go away and look at what is happening in other authorities. So it should feed into your own action plan. So what we will be speaking to your officers about when they're undertaking that review is, and they should be informing that as part of the new strategy, so it will come through. Obviously, we can confirm in an email if that is of any benefit to you in terms of the summarising what we have, the discussion that we will have with the officers. But I suppose I don't think we can underestimate the importance of engagement here with members of the public, and how that is very likely to determine how effective a waste strategy is, and it will differ depending on what arrangements you already have in place in Torfaen as opposed to another council, on how you engage at this point in time. And I know that you're developing as part of your action plan an engagement strategy anyway, but it's making sure that the engagement arrangements that you have already as a council are used to the maximum, as well as looking for different ways of engaging, and you'll get that from speaking to other councils also as to what's worked and what what's not worked for them. But again, different demographics and different people, different communities will require different ways of engaging with. So you can learn from and then tailor to yourselves, yes.
Councillor Ashley?
Question number 3. Proposal 2 makes reference to utilising the scrutiny function to inform the decision-making process and not just post-decision reviews. The committee feel that it have been heavily involved in pre-decision scrutiny, especially in relation to waste. Is there anything that we are missing? Any advice that you can provide, or do you know of any examples of local authorities who are doing it better? You okay with what I've said there for me to repeat?
Yeah, absolutely. No.
Sorry.
Thank you. Yeah, in terms of the scrutiny, and particularly the pre-decision scrutiny, obviously the committee has made the comment about being involved. I think that it's largely a broader point in terms of getting the balance right between the pre and the post-decision. And again, coming back to reiterate the sort of point that's already been made, is not always a one-size-fits-all. Just because there's a decision to be made, it doesn't necessarily need pre-decision scrutiny and vice versa. So it is about getting that balance right. In terms of wider information, wider assistance and that kind of thing, I had a chance to have a chat with some of my colleagues, and they did signpost me perhaps it might be useful to have a discussion with Conwy Council. They certainly do pre-decision scrutiny there, and they get involved in that, and my colleagues have been sort of involved in around that. So it may be well be worth having a chat to them and seeing what they do. But again, it does come back to that, I suppose, local circumstances, the nature of the decisions. In terms of sort of wider guides and information, there's certainly a number of places myself we can point you to. There was a recent Wales Audit Office report, Good Question, Good Scrutiny, which it's available on the web, and we can make that available to you via email if needs be. And that sets out sort of a range of issues around the scrutiny process and how committees can go about it in perhaps the most effective way, and some ideas, some case studies and some good examples. It's also worth perhaps having a look at the Centre for Public Scrutiny. They provide a range of useful information through guides and reports and various other things, and there are things you can pull out of that. Again, I suppose it's just coming to that one point. There isn't necessarily an off-the-shelf solution or a tick-box solution. It's about considering all of the issues and thinking about what's right for the council, what's right for the particular service, what's right for the particular issue that's being scrutinised. But certainly those things that I've signposted there, perhaps having a chat to Conwy, the Wales Audit Office report, and the Centre for Public Scrutiny, which provides quite a lot of material, useful guides, reports, and that sort of thing. So that should be of help for you.
I'm intrigued about this because obviously a lot of us have been at this for the last 3 years. Have you actually looked at the facility that we have, which I wouldn't, because Norm's not in your head at the moment, about our camera? Have you looked at our podcast to see how we do it? So I'm intrigued to see, because that is useful, how we do it better.
Yes, and more councils are using webcasting at the moment, which makes it much more accessible to see us, so and to keep track of things. So yes, we have been involved with that. Obviously, as part of the corporate assessment, as Chris said at the beginning, we'll be undertaking that in the new year, and as part of that we'll be looking at the effectiveness of scrutiny and pre-decision and post-decision scrutiny across the board, not just with this committee. Yes, it's there. It's a free resource. It's interesting. It helps us to keep track of and up to date with our knowledge of councils.
Because I was going to say, one of the things I do in my other role, which is not here, is actually I do go and do exactly what you said, and have a look at other councils. It's an incredibly useful tool. I take your point exactly on that.
I think it's worth mentioning again that pre-decision scrutiny can be useful. It can also be done in an ineffective manner. So it's not simply about increasing the level of pre-decision scrutiny and, if you like, using that as a buffer for the council for decision making. That's important. It's not about that. The scrutiny committees are not there to make decisions; they're there to scrutinise. But clearly, they can be utilised in a pre-decision setting. So it's about understanding what it's being used for, not overusing it. It can be used to excess, and it can also be underutilised. So it's the nature of the decision and everything that surrounds that, really.
And in relation to the new strategy that will be coming before you as council, obviously you would probably expect to be involved with pre-decision of that strategy in the building of it, also as a means of engagement with wider members, given that waste and the waste service affects everybody, all the electorate. So I'm sure you will be interested as part of that, as part of working it into your work programme, some pre-decision scrutiny on the strategy coming before you in the new year.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with you. In your view, what more can we do to communicate to those residents who are not normally engaged with recycling? I know you made reference to it in the report, and we've looked at this, and I know there was 38 roadshows held, regarding waste and all over the borough, and we still, how do you target the ones that are not engaged? Have you got any sort of comments or ideas?
I think, we were aware, obviously, when we did the work about the road shows and the various elements of engagement that were undertaken here. I think, again, sometimes comes down to local circumstances, and as you've mentioned there, in terms of those that generally don't participate. Again, in terms of additional information, I've had to think about this, and there's some things that we can direct you to, particularly around the Participation Cymru. There's some practitioners' manuals around engagement, national principles, sort of good practice, that kind of thing, really. I've also had some commentary from colleagues of mine that have been involved with Denbighshire recently, who've done some different engagement type things. So it might be worth having a chat with them as well. But again, it's a difficult one because, as you said, it is based on local circumstances. So it's trying to establish, I suppose, what is out there, what's good practice, trying to provide best practice, what's good practice, and see if that, how that can be applied within Torfaen. Although I absolutely appreciate that, you did participate, you did engage, did involve yourselves in those engagement processes. It's having a think, perhaps, whether they were the right means and correct mechanisms for doing it.
Yeah, because I think it's difficult, because I know we've went on social media, Torfaen Talks, roadshows, but we tried, but you still got that small or big core that just are not interested in participating, and it is difficult. Councillor Seaborn? If
I could come in there, Chair, I think it would be worth, we have done a lot of work with schools, primary schools and the secondary schools. I think that should be carried on, to hit, those pupils there, or the students. Also, with other agencies like the Over 50s Forum, we should be consulting with those, because they are the grassroots of, the people that are out there. Also, the community councils, we have 5 or 6, community councils within Torfaen. They're the first tier of government. We should be consulting with those as well. I know, talks have been going on with with their environment projects, also with the RSLs, because they have the major majority of housing, and whereas we can perhaps get private residents to recycle, it's those people who live in the RSL properties that maybe are not within flats and different things like that.
I think as well it's important to recognise that the education or the communication engagement is part of that process of strategy. The whole overarching approach to waste. You have your setting out of your strategy, and that leads into business and service plans. Part of that then is the education, awareness and engagement, and then right at the other end of that then is also consideration but potentially needing to be given to enforcement. So you have the education and engagement up front. You try and bring people in as much as possible, and to a degree then some consideration needs to be given to what if any, enforcement action is at the other end of that sort of that journey, if you like. And I think that's something perhaps should be considered as well.
I was about to say that obviously in our roles as ward councillors, some of us have got considerable experience in this particular bit. I go back to the days when we actually set this up as a voluntary activity over from the directors of the company who did that. So, no, and like Phil said, the officers have engaged considerably. Some of it's been successful, some isn't. It's chipping away a lot of the time at all the parties out there. And the most successful, I think, as far as we've got a lot of the time, is children leading on from there and moving up. But getting the important thing is this 70% that we've got. It's not got there by accident. It's a gradual process. It's moved up and up and up. The targeting on it, and I think the problem we got is how you get the critical mass at the top end, and I think that's where people are successful in Wales have obviously managed to extract more and more out of that. I think what you're saying, we're looking at other people and how they achieve that is got to be important, because how we engage with our community and them becoming stakeholders is an important thing. That's certainly something we've recognised on this committee.
Going back to the point to try and summarise it really, the engagement part, in not just in delivering the strategy, but in actually shaping the strategy, owning it from the start, will help to a certain degree. Obviously won't cover everything, but in terms of getting people involved and actually as stakeholders, they will see the importance of this for themselves, because obviously, not meeting the targets, the council will be facing significant penalties, which has a knock-on effect in itself on your the budget, the cake that you have to cut up with other services. So if you take away from, if you have to pay a fine, you have less for other services. So it's that. So the understanding around that and the engagement ahead of the implementation will help.
Can I just add one little bit? The one thing I went out with the officers on the I think you've done it as well, haven't you? The secret shopper, and that's absolutely fascinating, because you see their management problem, you also see the workforce problem. Have you done that at all? No, it's actually worth doing. Whichever authority you go out and do the secret shopper, because you see the management problems, you see the work problem. It's really quite interesting. Just an hour and a half going out there with the managers, with. We've had the mayor had actually went out and did half a day's work with them. It's really, really interesting exercise just to see what the problems are, because it's very illustrative, worth doing if you can get a chance. I only suggest that because I did it years ago when I used to work for a certain organisation. But that side of it, all I suggested, because you can see the implications of all this. And I think the secret shopper was good, because you get some communities do it and some don't, and that really brought it home to me. And I've been part of this business for a long time. I suggest that. You see the limitations of what we're trying to ask people to do.
I do think it's important to get everybody, all the agencies and public involved to shape the strategy if it's going to work. Has any other member got any other questions? No? Right, well, thank you very much, Non and Chris, for coming today. Thank you.
Just very quickly, I was going to say I'll pull together the information that I've given to you verbally today, but there are various sort of web links and that sort of thing. And after I had a chance to meet with Andy on Monday, we can pull that together and arrange discussions. Thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you very much. Duncan and Dana, nice to see you again. Right, Chris Pugh from WAO. we asked him if they had any best practice in relation to providing a waste strategy, and they have. He's going to provide us some with information with. He's got expert in the waste, which he's going to sort of pull together documents and pass them all on. So I just wondered, have you done any research to any of the local authorities and what they've done in regard to the waste strategy?
Not yet. What I've said in the report and in the action plan is that because we've had the skinny bin rollout, which took us through until middle of November, we're still dealing with the aftermath of that. Having said that, we've not. The aftermath has been good, if you see what I mean. It's not been as bad as perhaps people had feared, but we are still having to deal with that, and that means going out to visit families who ring up and say, I can't cope. It's only a small team. We just don't have the capacity to start on it now. What I've said in the action plan is it's in our it'll be in our team plan for next year, and we're going to start the process in January. So part of that process will be doing desk-based research to see what's out there, and I'm really pleased to hear that, because if there is exemplar strategies out there, it will be good for us to have a look at those so that we can, see which bits of those we think would be good for our strategy. I'm not suggesting that we completely crib it, because we've got to do something that's right for Torfaen.
No, definitely. We're going to be working on proposal by proposal. We just thought that's the easiest way to do it, okay? So we're still on proposal 1. Do you intend to engage with the public when putting together the new waste strategy?
I think we would do our research. We would probably come up with a draft of the strategy, and I think once we've come up with a draft that we think as an officer base is something that would be would reflect what we need to do going forward, I think we would probably then engage with a whole series of people. We'd probably come into scrutiny with the draft. And I think I've said as part of the action plan, I've tried to set out in the action plan the sorts of things that at this very early stage we're considering should be in the strategy. But if there are things that this committee feels at this stage should be in the strategy, then let me know. We can make sure that we can do that. So we'd certainly take it in the scrutiny process. And as we did with our cemetery rules and regulations, we can actually put a draft out there and ask people to give comment on it. Particularly from a point of view of how easily understood is it, how easily is it to read. And when we did that on the cemetery rules and regulations, that worked really well. So,
because I think it was felt as well that the more people that are engaged with setting up and getting all their views and ideas, then because it does affect everybody, so it'd be good to have. Okay, we'll move on to proposal 2 then. Oh, sorry, Councillor Ashley.
I noticed going down through this, you got the desktop research. You've got original One Wales documentation, and then you've got our old friend, the Wellbeing and Future Generation. How you going to take all that into account? You're smiling at me on this one. And so don't for that matter. I mean, obviously there's a lot of work in there.
There is a lot of work, but it's something that we recognise that we need to do. Yeah. I think that we will set down and write out a strategy in terms of where we think we need to be going to get to where we need to be in terms of targets, but also the wider, more holistic agenda around education, awareness, enforcement. We can do that piece of work, but we do need to ensure that whatever we've written still, A, meets the objectives through the One Planet Wales and Zero Waste, and also we do need to make sure that we've got linkages into Wellbeing and Future Generations Act to make sure that we're meeting all of those elements and we're not missing anything, basically. So I think the plan is to put together a draft document and then start to cross-reference it against some of these key other documents. We need to make sure there's linkages.
You've taken on board that, and I'm sure Duncan has, that in future with our authority, this is going to be almost an audit thing. From my reading of the situation with Wellbeing and Future Generation, a lot of it is an ongoing audit now, isn't it? Yeah. So that any sort of development strategy is going to have that in as an audit. All those measures are audit things.
Okay.
Sorry. Afternoon, both. On page 19, it's like the 4th bullet point down. Educate residents and take appropriate action of enforcement. Have you any specific areas that you wish to, or you were going to go down that we haven't been down before?
Well, as an authority, we don't currently have an enforcement policy at all. No. And in fact, when I came in front of you as committee, and also member seminar and council. I think I was quite clear trying to point out that we don't have an enforcement policy and we will need to develop one. Again, it's something that we need to take forward. It'll form part of our team plan for next year. As an authority, we've tended not to enforce against residents. We've always tried the carrot approach and the education and awareness. But we suspect, as other councils are now finding, that we will get to a point, potentially, with certain residents where we've all done all the education and awareness we can do, and effectively they're just refusing to recycle. And so we are going to have something in our tool bag, and it will be a matter for members whether we actually use that or not, but we need to have something within our tool bag that will allow us to take that next step if we ever have to. I'd like to be in a position that we never have to do that. But we may have occasions when we feel we need to, and it would be good to have that enforcement policy there. So that is something that does need to come back to you. I am aware that it's something that we need to do, and I think that's why that point has been picked up here in the proposal.
So we're very distinct. I mean, we obviously have had Newport in here who do use the stick and the carrot, and we that was back before you, and they very distinctly go down that line. They will go back and do something. So we're well aware of that. When you distinctly don't do that, do you? No, you have gone on top. He was not very happy with them, as far as I remember.
We've, I say we don't, but that was a council decision. That was the council policy, really, that we don't enforce first. We educate and try and raise awareness first, and then we haven't ever enforced, really. I mean, we do send letters under Section 46 of the Environmental Protection Act. We have sent letters out that have threatened enforcement, but we've never needed, thankfully, we've never needed to follow through on those letters. We've never needed to.
Sorry.
We've never needed to.
No. Sorry.
But, we have to assume that at some point in the future, there may be an occasion where we feel it now becomes necessary for us to take that sort of action. It's a bit like fly tipping, to use that as an example. I mean, there's some legal requirements around fly tipping, but we would rather try and, like the Community Byways Day, we would try and solve the problem at source rather than constantly just use enforcement, because it doesn't always necessarily lead to the right outcome, or a mixture of the two. To date, as a council, we've chosen to go down the education route and the awareness route, but we will need to get to a stage where, if we need to, we have an enforcement policy that we can call upon if we need to use it. But all I'm saying is it wouldn't be my first choice. My first choice would be to work with residents.
And Chair, I think members are probably quite happy with that approach, because none of us like the heavies if we can help it.
No, totally agree. But then again, there's always so many times you can dangle the carrot. Sometimes you have to. Councillor Seaborn.
Could I just ask a quick one again, please, Dan? What infrastructure is going to be required?
By infrastructure, so our current infrastructure, what we said in our current strategy, which was in the 2009 Cabinet report, was around improving our household waste recycling centre, which we've done, reducing residual capacity, which we've now done. Future infrastructure things could be around having a reuse shop somewhere. We're looking at doing something like that on the Household Waste Recycling Centre, and basically just looking at going back to the blueprint and seeing what else is in there that we haven't currently been able to do that we could take forward. I can't give you many more examples off the top of my head now. It's something that we'd need to do some research on, but that's the sort of thing that I mean by infrastructure. The other thing to mention then, of course, and you'd have picked up on this from the scrutiny session you had on the budget, is the bulking station, which of course that was a new thing for us. That came in a bit left field during the course of this year, but that's a piece of infrastructure, so that's actually putting in a type of service. There could be changes, members might make suggestions for changes in service, and we would consider that to be infrastructure, so it's about how we deliver our service.
Thank you, Janet. Councillor Seaborn.
In Proposal 2, what are the timescales involved for the peer review?
There is a report to Council next week on progress that's been made on the peer review. There's a peer review action group, and I'd say there are actions within the peer review that have already been completed. There are other ones that are going to take a significantly longer time. For example, street scene review which was going to come here in October. It's coming back in March. There's the alternative delivery that we're going to look at. That'll take through next year. So parts of it will be done very quickly. Other parts of it will be done over time.
Can I just add, though, in terms of the elements of that related specifically to the waste arena, I've tried to outline in the action plan that a number of the things there have already been set up or are taking place.
If I could come back in, how often are the joint briefings between the leader, Councillor Jones, Councillor Cunningham and Councillor Clark held, and what is the objective of these briefings?
They're held once every 6 weeks, normally 6 weeks. They're normally on the rising of Cabinet. So it's 4 or 5 weeks, I would say, yeah, I said 6, but it's 4 or 5 weeks. The purpose behind it is to give me a little bit of clarity, actually. I've got 4 executive members, so actually having them all looking at the same ball as me does help. So those meetings sort of draw us together, and they know what I'm doing, which is important, and vice versa. I know what their thoughts are, so it's very useful.
With the next one, you've got the review role descriptions for Cabinet members involved in neighbourhood services, and it's ongoing. When will the review of the descriptions be complete, and who's carrying out the review?
I'm not. I don't think those exec members would appreciate the chief officer carrying out that review. No, I think that's something that's being centrally done. It's not to do on the list that's down to me. It's on the council agenda and needs to see it's ongoing. So you're in country that I'm not absolutely sure where we are on that.
So just ask that because with this business of the umpteen exec members you're reporting back to, where does waste sit? Does waste sit under one or a few of them?
Waste sits under one. So
Councillor Cunningham, is it?
Correct.
Yeah. So you've got a good, certain other people would say, a good steer on this from one person.
Yeah, we've got one exec member.
Yeah.
But the peer review looked at the whole of neighbourhood services. So I felt it was important to include the action that we've taken across the board, really.
Okay.
In Proposal 3, when will the annual service standards report to the public be published, and what format will it take?
It's going to be, well, you've got a meeting on the 13th of January, and you've asked me this question as part of that, and I've given you the answer, but I'll tell you now anyway. We met on the 16th of September, and I received your feedback as a result of that. I submitted it into comms immediately, within a day or two of the committee meeting. I had the final proof back on the 30th of November. So I also submitted to comms your views, your quite strong views that it should go into Torfaen Talks. I've met with comms then on the 1st of December, and what we've agreed is initially it will go out electronically because we can do that immediately, and it's been programmed in for February's Torfaen Talks. Unfortunately, we'd missed December's. By the time I got the proof back, December's Torfaen Talks deadline had already passed, unfortunately.
Apart from email and electronically Torfaen Talks, is there any other way you'll be putting this plan out?
We're not proposing to post it to people, that's too costly. And I mean, we could give it to papers, but because of the size of it, it's quite large actually, the document itself. I'm not sure that they would print that. So the idea is to have a centre spread within Torfaen Talks. It would be signposted from our website, and we'd also signpost it through our social media feeds.
I think it could be quite helpful if, I know you didn't want to post it to every household, but if everyone's having a council tax reminder, a smaller, briefer snapshot of it would be quite helpful going out with that.
There are other freebies that might sort of, like the thing that Community Council has, that Residents' Handbook, it goes out, maybe consider putting it that does cost, but it might be a cheaper way of doing it and another way of doing it.
Will you be contacting the RSLs within Torfaen, for those properties, for them to advertise it out?
Yeah, we can do that. And we work with, particularly Bronavon, we work with all the RSLs. But certainly when we were doing the communications around the Skinny Bin in advance of rollout, Bronavon were really helpful in terms of taking some of our literature and putting it out to all of their tenants. So yeah, we can look to that as well.
One of the things our pre-session yesterday was the different ways in which you get this information out. It's not necessarily, certainly when you're looking at your information going out generally, I think I've got the right bit here for doing this, some bits, electronics not appropriate for the much voltage, they still like looking at old-fashioned literature a bit, and the intelligibility of the map, some people like prose and some people like other things, it may be that different ways of doing it, we need to look at it.
And I think that was made quite strongly in the committee meeting on the 16th of September, and I took that on board. So whereas initially we probably planned just to do it electronically, I have raised it with comms colleagues to say we need to get this in Torfaen Talks to make sure that there's a written version that people can refer to.
It is quite a while as well, isn't it, from being launched in April 14 just to going out now. Is it going to be relaunched again then, or looked at again next April?
Yeah, I think there might be some confusion between, so the actual service standards themselves were launched in April 2014. The bit that I'm talking about now is the report on the first year of progress against those standards. What we agreed on the 16th of September committee was that we would relaunch them next April 2016 because we would need to build in a review of them, bearing in mind we've changed our infrastructure, we've changed our service because we've got the Skinny Bin, and of course when we wrote them in April 2014 we didn't make any mention of the purple-lidded bin. So we are going to have to review them in January, February, March, ready to relaunch in April 2016. So just for clarity, the thing I've been talking about is the actual report on the service standards rather than the service standards themselves.
If I could just go back, Chair, to where we contact people, would it be possible to go to something like Church Coffee Mornings, the MS Society, because they meet north and south, the over 50s forums, places like that?
Yeah, we do a lot of road shows, and if we do get invitations to go and visit various groups, we're more than happy to do that. If you've got a list of groups that you think would be interested, then we'd be more than happy to go and visit them. Not a problem.
Yeah, because I think every ward and every member would have a list of community groups which would be beneficial. Right, okay. Should we move on then to proposal 4? Yeah? Councillor Ashley?
I should remember this, shouldn't I? Question 7. Since the action plan was produced, do you have any other further information on the timescale on the appointment of the temporary HR officer?
I'm afraid I do not.
Okay.
Sorry.
Question number 8 then. That was a pretty no. Question number 8. What improvements in behaviour and practices have you seen since the recirculation of job descriptions since early 2015?
So one of the items raised as part of the Weld Audit Office report was a concern that there were certain operatives who were still operating under a task and finish. Now, we've not had task and finish for years. The system that we have had for a number of years is that we break the crews into their various waste streams. So there's a black waste stream for your wheel bins, there's a green waste stream, there's a food and card waste stream, and then there's the recycling waste stream. And there's different numbers of crews in each of those various waste streams. But we tell, so say for example on green there's 3 vehicles, say. So we tell all the crews that work on these 3 vehicles, all of you are 18. So although each vehicle is given a specific round to do on a specific day, all of those vehicles have got to work together to ensure that for that day all of the work is brought in. So what used to happen many years ago was an individual crew would do their work and finish. And then the other 2 crews, say they had a vehicle breakdown or some other issue, then work would get left out. So collections wouldn't be made because they were operating a job and finish. Well, we stopped that years ago and said that you have to work as a team. So we've been doing that for a number of years. there was an indication made in the Wales Audit Office report that there were 1 or 2 operatives who were still thinking they were operating a job unfinished. So as a result of that, in very early this year, I reissued the job descriptions. Now, these were job descriptions they'd already had, so these weren't new job descriptions. I didn't change them in any way. I just reissued them as a reminder to say to them, this is what your job description says. There is no job unfinished in this council. You work between the hours of 7:30 and 3:30, and you work as a team. So within your individual waste streams, you all work together until such time as the work is brought in.
Vic, did you have any consultation with the unions over this?
I didn't need to. This was their existing job description. So I did contact the union and say to the union, this is what I'm intending to do. And I explained why I was doing it and my intention. And there was no issue from the union. But there was no requirement upon me to actually consult with them because I hadn't changed anything. It was just a reissuing of an existing job description. It was just a little reminder.
And could I ask, is there any contact between vehicles? You know, like if one breaks down, can one call the other vehicle up, or do they have to go back through to the centre?
Because of the system that we have, so each waste stream, so again I'll use green as the example, there's a charge hand who is sort of in charge, if you like, of the whole team, but that person is also a driver. So they do both functions. So that person, each of the drivers have got mobile phones. And so what will happen is everyone's instructed, say they get to about 1 o'clock, if they think they're going to have a problem on their round for whatever reason, they're instructed to ring the charge hand to say, I might have a problem today. It could have been an access issue, they could have had a puncture, something could have happened, so that the charge hand is then able to rearrange the resource to ensure that all of the work for the green for that particular day is collected. It's only when we get major issues, like major vehicle breakdowns or major access issues, that we're unable to complete. But as you know, members, if that happens, we make sure we put that out on social media, and we've not had one of those for quite a while now.
If I'm getting it right, your waste stream structure, do you actually work them all as a block then? You work your black box, or your different vehicles, including your dustbin lorries as well? Or as a block for each, as that map thing, so each area you work down the valley, you've got separate structures, have you?
No.
Just one?
So if you imagine we've got, and I'll stick with the green example, okay? So we've got, let's say we've got 3 green vehicles. On a Monday, those green vehicles know what rounds they've got to do on that Monday. And those 3 teams, so each vehicle, which has got a driver and 2 loaders, so 3 members of staff, they know what route they've got to do on that particular day. So if they do their work and they finish their work, they then ring the charge hand and say, what else is out? And so what happens is the three of the vehicles will then work together to make sure that all the work for that particular day is done. Exactly the same thing happens on the black waste stream, which is your purple lidded bins now. Exactly the same thing happens on the food and card waste stream, and exactly the same thing happens on the recycling. What we can't have, though, is cross-working because they're different vehicles. So you couldn't have a recycling vehicle helping out the black, and you couldn't have the black helping out recycling. So you've got the green, you've got the black, all those vehicles work together. The food and card, all those vehicles work together. And then the recycling vehicles, and there's 12 of those now, they all work together as a big team.
How many of those would be operated? Because what I think people are quite intrigued about is how many of those be operating at any one time.
They're all operating.
So in the valley, down this valley, any one day, you've got a fortnight. It's a fortnightly run around, isn't it?
Correct.
From what I can see,
That's right.
It's a black and a green, isn't it?
It is, but it's not split. It's not the vehicles that we use for black are not the vehicles that we use for green.
Yeah.
So we don't say that we do all the black of the whole borough in 1 week, and then we do all the green of all the borough in the next week. We do half the borough on black of week 1 and half the borough on green with different vehicles on week 1, and then we do the other half on black and green. So all the vehicles are being used all the time, and all the crews are out all the time. I mean, we do 140,000 collections a week, so it has to be split in a certain way. Recycling's weekly, which is why there's so many of them. Food is weekly, and then cardboard is fortnightly, and again they split it, but it's split by geographically. It's split half the borough 1 week and half the borough the other week.
The reason I ask you this is because there's this process, if it's better known, is actually when people start to own it a bit. Because they understood dustbin lorries or, that collection, because it's relatively simple. This is a little bit more complex, but I think once people get their head around how it works, because it's the problem, because I'll be honest and say a lot of people down my road, they stick the red out and see what the next door neighbour does. If you've got the wrong next door neighbour doing, I think somebody admitted that that's what they did down their road. And somebody's laughing, aren't they? So this...
Sure, that is a method for a lot of people.
That is a method for a lot of people. So if somebody gets it wrong down the street and doesn't put the green bin, or doesn't put the car, the two ones that always get it wrong is the green bin or the cardboard box. If the bag out. If you don't get it right, then Roger and Adrian have a terrible time with whoever you've got doing the follow-ups. Yes. That ownership is the thing we've got to get people understanding about this waste stream, isn't it? It always is.
I know the calendars are really helpful, though, aren't they? I think people... Right.
Sorry, Chair,
no.
I think it's important.
Should we move? Yeah. Should we move on to proposal 5 then?
Is that me again?
No.
That's good.
When considering the introduction of service level agreements with the fleet services, there's a recommendation to make appropriate provision alternatives in the event of delays. Do you have any idea what these alternatives will be?
Again, this is a piece of work we've not started yet, Chair. It's something that we've programmed in now for January, once we've dealt with the aftermath of the skinny bin rollout. It's new for us. It's not something that we've had before. So we are going to have to do some research, and that will involve bringing other authorities to find out what have you got in place, how does it work for you. And again, talking to our fleet colleagues, really, around what options are out there. So I can't give you an answer today, but it is something that we are going to actively look at with our fleet colleagues.
It seems that January is going to be very busy for you. Can you foresee any problems with collating all this information together in such a short time?
Well, we're not going to start it and get it finished in January. That's what I would say. We're starting it in January. I can't say it's getting all the work... You're absolutely right. We won't get all the work finished in January. I don't think writing a new waste strategy to last 10 years is going to be a quick process in any event. I think that we're going to have to spend some considered time on it to get it right, and to get it right for Torfaen. Again, the SLA with fleet, until we start that process, we don't really know how quickly that can be turned around. But, it will feature in the team plan going forward. And we'll manage the workload as best we can. I think all I would say, every month's busy for us, so it's just what's on the list that changes.
And could I dare ask, if you do such a good job on this strategy, within 2 years it could be scuppered with the reorganisation? How would you feel about that?
I think if we set out a waste strategy for Torfaen for 10 years, and it's fit for Torfaen for 10 years, even if there's a reorganisation, it might still be fit for Torfaen for the following 8 years. And who's to say that other authorities with whom we may or may not be merged, if they've got their own waste strategy, there could be synergies in there. They might have things in there because they might have written those after ours that we think, oh, that's a good idea, we'll do that too. So I don't see that as a problem.
I think working together with all the other authorities, you'll have best practice, and hopefully we'll all come to the same. Right, okay, we'll move on to proposal 6. Now, yesterday in pre-agenda, Councillor Ashley was talking about income streams and trend analysis. So would you want to come in with that question, Councillor Ashley?
I do, yeah. I was looking at this, and they couldn't really get their head around it. I certainly could, as I've been here before, as you well know. And rather than us talk about contracts, which I know is not a good idea because you've got to go somewhere with that, what I was interested in terms of contracts, bearing in mind how many you got of them, was whether we could have trends across, as a scrutiny thing, and know where you were going with it. I mean, bear in mind I have been here before, and some of these, it would be far more interesting to know, if we're talking about contracts for this committee, to know if you're going to report back to us on anything at all, to know what the trends were, rather than us know the details. That makes sense. That would not enable you to give us a lot of detail, but it would be useful for the council to know. I'm thinking about markets and stuff like that, rather because, is cardboard making money for the council? No, or not. Or if it's not, why isn't it?
Yeah.
Because there's always this implication out here. Coming back to my previous comments about people owning the field, glass, metal, all the rest of it, why are we collecting this stuff? It's a larger thing about global warming and stuff like that. And is there any money in this? Because there's always a suspicion that somebody's making money on this or not. Why are we doing it? And it would be useful to see if there's a global market in this stuff. And that the contracts we got and why are we doing them? There is a regional market, a national market in this stuff. That was my reasoning in question. You can tell me I'm talking a load of rubbish here or not.
No, I fully understand the point you're making.
Yeah.
I think a little bit of clarity.
Yeah.
We've only got one contract currently where we ever get an income from, and that's purely around the dry recycle it, which is what we collect, what you put in your black box, and also your cardboard. That's the only thing that we get any income from at all. And currently, we don't. I mean, we don't make a lot of income on that. What was agreed at Cabinet just last month? No, a week ago, 2 weeks ago, was that we're going to actually bring the operation back in-house. And we're going to do that ourselves. So that won't be a contract, that will be an in-house operation in the same way that our collections are in-house operations. So I think there's definitely merit, because that's then going to be an in-house operation, in the same way that our spend is closely monitored on how we run that operation. I think absolutely there will be as close, if not closer, monitoring on the income streams that we're bringing in. So the remaining contracts that we will then have will purely be around treatment and disposal of waste that we cannot get an income from. So there'll be no analysis to give you in terms of income. So, for example, our black waste, we've now got our new contract for long-term black waste that will go over to Tredent Park in Cardiff and be treated. An element of that will be pulled out and can be counted as recycled because they will treat it in that way. The rest will become bottom ash, some of which we can count, and whatever's left over, which will be very small, will end up going into landfill. There's no income to be made there. That's purely a cost to the council. There's a cost to us in paying the contractor to treat and then dispose of that material. The same with green and the same with food. There's no income to be derived from that. So what this particular proposal was suggesting was that we provide on a regular basis to scrutiny information on how our contracts are going. And I'm struggling with it, but I'm happy to take committee's view, because what would happen is we would come to you on a quarterly basis or whatever frequency you felt was relevant, and we would say, in this time frame, we sent this amount of material to this contractor, it cost us this amount of money, and we got this amount of recycling out of it. And I don't know what value that adds to your process, but there's no income there.
What was suggesting, rather than putting the detail of the contract in terms of the contractor, that you put maybe say the cost implication or the disposal implication, rather than put down the detail, because then at least we know what the implications of that is. That's a much better way of doing it. If there is any income, that's obviously useful to know about. If there isn't, it's a cost to the council. That's probably more useful than us actually knowing who it goes to, unless there's some job implication in it, and we're developing jobs like we do in-house. That's actually a positive as well as a negative there, isn't it?
But again, I think on one sheet of paper, I would be able to say to you, we sent this tons of black waste. It doesn't matter, okay, I'm going to tell you where it went, but I could just say, and it cost us this amount. You know, we can give you that information, but the only question I'm asking is, what's the value added? What would you use that information for?
And
how does
the
that
decisions
feed
had already been made, so we couldn't scrutinise it because it had already been done. This is where we were.
And in terms of future award of contract, I mean, and this isn't a waste thing, this is a whole council thing. When contracts are awarded, they become operational matters, and they get managed by officers. And we have regular performance meetings with our contractors and so on and so forth. And I think that was actually picked up in the Wales Audit Office report, who said that we had very robust arrangements around that. We then report back to members by exception. So if we have a problem with something, we come to members. So, for example, you will recall, I hope, that I had to bring a report forward because we had a contractor problem when we were buying our new recycling vehicles. We had a contractor failure. So exactly. So we bring things back to members by exception. When we then go to renew these contracts, now at the moment, the residual contract is 20, 25 years long. You're talking a long time away before we need to renew that contract. So when we come to renew that contract and we go out through an O2 tender, When it then comes into Cabinet, which is what the current contract standard orders say, it has to be anonymised. So even if the same contractor has put in a bid, you won't know that it's the same contractor because we have to anonymise who they are. So even knowing their past performance doesn't help you make a decision about who's the best person to come forward. Where it will play out is as part of our procurement process, we do evaluation. So it's not just based on price, it's based on quality as well. So their performance will feed into that process, which is the matrix you get attached to the Cabinet report, but you won't know who they are. So again, I am struggling to get my head around this one because I'm not sure what the value added is. Now, we can give you the information, it's not a problem, but it's to what value? To what value is it to you, other than it's interesting, and how do you use that for scrutiny?
This is what we were discussing yesterday, and some members don't find that there is any value added. But it was just the trends that you came in.
All I would say is over time it probably does a trend, and it probably satisfies the Wales Audit Office, so it's probably value of being it on there as well. I don't know. Duncan's looking a bit doubtful on that.
No. I think the trends in the recycling market are very important, and they'll be reported not to scrutiny. That'll be a matter for finance or something along those sorts of lines. If we start making a profit that we've projected we're going to make, if it goes below that because those prices drop, it will be dealt with by the council in another way rather than scrutiny.
The only trend you're going to pick up potentially is changes in tonnages. So, for example, over time we know that the amount of the arisings of waste are going down over time. So the only trend you're going to be able to pick up is going to be that over time we are collecting less black waste, for instance, from the curbside. So, you know, that might be very interesting information, but again, we're not going to be able to do an in-depth analysis and explain why, if people are buying different things, or, you know, we're not going to be able to say, we can point and say that, so let me give an example. We've rolled out Skinny Bin, and we've been closely monitoring what's happened since we've done that in terms of, and what I can say to you is that in the first 2 months since we've started to roll out Skinny Bin, and bearing in mind we hadn't finished rollout until the middle of November, so we're only really 4 weeks into it being fully rolled out, we've seen a 20% reduction in the amount of material that's being put out in black bins. And that's exactly what we wanted it to do. We're diverting the material from the black waste stream into the other waste streams, which is where it should be. We've seen a big jump in food. So in October, I think it was about 26%, and we only just started to roll it out in November, 45% increase in the amount of food waste being recycled, which is exactly what we wanted it to do. Now, we haven't seen those figures through onto our overall recycling yet. We don't know how that's impacted upon our overall recycling figure yet. It's too early for that. So the point being that if I brought information to you that showed that month on month, quarter on quarter, maybe year on year, waste, the amount of tonnage that we send to our residual contractor is going down, well, we would have expected it to go down because of our infrastructure that we've put in place and the plans that we've got, but we're not going to be able to give you more of an in-depth analysis to say, other than we believe it's because of, not categorically because of, but what is that telling? I mean, I can do that. You know, we can have an annual report that said this is the sort of waste that we've been collecting off people and what we've sent off and how much it's cost us. We can do that, you know, or maybe that's something we don't have to do through committee. It's something that we could do as part of a performance.
Yeah, no, I think performance annually.
As long as it goes in there somewhere.
Councillor Seaborn.
Thank you, Chair. On page 28, down the bottom there, miscollection data. When a report of a miscollection is reported, and the tracking system placed on the vehicles, is there a time given that they were in that location, like on a tachograph, or is it just, or isn't there any record that they've been in that place?
Yeah. So the miscollection data we get when people ring in and say we've missed their collection. So when that gets reported through to us through Call to Vine or through members or however it gets to us, it depends on the waste stream itself. As you know, Council took a policy 2 years ago now that we don't go back for black bins. Black wheelie bins, so purple bins I'll call them now. We don't go back for those. So when we get a report through to say that a bin has been missed, the first thing we do is go on a tracker system. So the tracker system, because what we say is, if it's our fault, we'll come back. If we've missed it, if we can see, we know that we've missed it. If, however, we've got good reason to assume that we were actually down the street and maybe the bin wasn't out, then we don't go back. So we've got a tracker system on every single one of our vehicles, which tells us every second of every day where that vehicle is. So when we get a complaint through on purple bins to say that it's not been collected, we go on tracker to see. And we've seen this as part of our complaint monitoring, when people actually put in formal complaints to say that we've missed their bin. We go on the tracker and we can prove that the vehicle's been down that street and outside that house. And when we can prove the vehicle's been there, we say, on the balance of probabilities, we don't believe we missed the bin, therefore we're not coming back to collect it. If, however, we go on the tracker system and we can see that for whatever reason the vehicle didn't go to that house or didn't go out down that street, we'll ring the crew straight away and find out what happened, was there an issue, and if we can see it's our fault, we go back and we get it. With anything else, recycling, food, card, then we go back anyway. So if someone rings through, we still record the information because it's important management information for us, performance management information. We still record it, but we go back regardless. And what we say to people is we try and go back the next day, is generally what we try and do. Or we try and give people a time frame depending on when they ring. Sometimes people will ring us at 4 o'clock on a Friday and it was missed on the Monday. They leave it a week sometimes before they even phone. And then we'll say to them, well, we'll try and get somebody to you on Monday, to make sure that it's done for you on Monday. But we record all of the information. We then produce that information in chart form and we put it down in the crew room, and we do it by crew. So the crews can see, for each individual crew, what their miss rate is for their collections. And obviously if we've got a particular crew that seems to have a high level of miss, well then they get called in and we have a discussion with them about that. And if performance doesn't improve, and if needs be, then we invoke the disciplinary procedures, and we have done.
Thank you. In proposal 7, you said all office-based staff regularly receive one-to-ones and annual work smart reviews. How often is regular in relation to the one-to-ones, and will operatives benefit from the same level of review?
The one-to-one is where we discuss with officers their current workload, and then we prioritise their workload. So one-to-ones don't necessarily apply to operational staff because they have a round to do each day. So it's not like they have reports to write or things to do like that. So to go back to Councillor Seaborn's point about January's going to be very busy, when I have my one-to-one with Cunnan and I'm doing his one-to-one, we'll have a list of all the things he's got to do and we prioritise his work based on all the things he's got to do. That doesn't necessarily apply to operational staff who've got a very set piece of work to do every single day. Work smarts, on the other hand, are around personal development. It's not about your workload and you're prioritising your workload. It's about how well have you performed as an individual, what's gone well for you, what's not gone well for you, do you have any development needs, and generally it's and your future. It's appraisal, effectively, yeah. So the office staff have regular one-to-ones, usually about monthly. The one-to-ones. Work smarts are annual because it's the annual appraisal. So we've just gone through an exercise of having all of the operational staff individually have gone through their work smart, their appraisal, their annual appraisal, and we will repeat that now every year. What we are going to do starting in 2016, not January, probably around about June, is we're going to start staggering them because there's a lot of staff to get through. So what we'll probably do from June onwards, we'll stagger so many staff per month and do those, and then we'll repeat the following year and so on, so that every member of operational staff gets their annual appraisal.
Education has a tracking system for each pupil within their schools. Do you think that a tracking system, something similar to the education one, where they can track pupils' progress, could that be modified for for your staff?
We can have a look at it. This is an educational attainment type record, is it? It shows how well they're doing from their report cards type thing. We could certainly have a look at it and see if it's adaptable to operational staff. We could do that. Yeah.
It may make your work a little bit easier when you're having your one-to-one, that you actually got a record of the...
Yeah. Well, the one-to-ones, which is the monthly meetings, the prioritising the workload, they're usually done on a Word document, but it is recorded. It is actually recorded because we may need to refer back to things that we've said. The work smarts are on Ivor, of course, so there is a permanent record of those, and that's done through a system. But we can certainly look at the educational system.
I've noticed on here that you got a performance level sickness and the cost of sickness to section. I presume level complaints and compliances. Obviously, that business because it's obviously one of the most dangerous areas of work, and I imagine in terms of also health and safety issues and back complaints and stuff like that. Have you managed, with this system, managed to bring it down?
Sorry, Councillor Ashley.
Yeah, having
system?
What type of work that you're doing is,
Yeah.
from staff's point of view, it's, I know traditionally it's one of the areas of work that is most taxing on an operative's area, because it traditionally always was. Have you managed to, with this Work Smart interview, bring down, because you obviously get a better contact from that point, from operatives' contact, are you bringing those complaints down a bit?
So you're talking about complaints from staff, health complaints from staff?
Yeah, health complaints,
right,
health
okay.
and safety, that sort of thing, because
Yeah.
it always was.
Yeah,
You know,
I mean,
is it helping with staff retention and
right.
and health? You know?
It's too early to say, because we started them, I
Yeah.
think, well, we've been doing them throughout the whole of November, December. We're coming to the end now, so it's a bit early to say that, because previously to doing this just recently, we'd found it very difficult to find a system for doing work smarts with the workforce. But with the IVO system, that's actually made it easier for us to be able to do that. So it's a bit early to say that. You're absolutely right. It's a very hard job. It's a very manual job. But we do monitor the staff. We do monitor the staff in terms of their health, if you like. And if we've got any concerns at all about member staff, if they bring that to us, or we've just got a concern, then we do refer them to occupational health. So, yeah. In terms of sickness generally, I think I covered off in the action plan. We have been working on the sickness, and that's been coming down. It's been coming down quite well. So, you know, there's a number of things that we're doing, and they're starting to have the side effect.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Seaborn. We move on to proposal 8 now.
Thank you, Chair. Can you tell us more about the Mosaic data, what it does, how you think it will help target groups that are not usually engaged, and what other timescales involved?
So, the council has purchased Mosaic data, and they've purchased it from Experian, which is the company that does credit reference checks. So whenever any individual completes information online or through the census or through any type of information like that, that is all stored in a big old fat database somewhere, and you can buy that information. It's how direct marketing companies operate. But the information that the council can purchase actually contains details about people's preferences and also their predications. So, for example, the information that I have seen, and it's in its infancy, we've not had it in the council very long, but the information that I have seen will for example, show people's predication to recycling. It will actually show whether they're the sort of person who's going to recycle or not. So what that means is, now that we've got this information, if we want to do a campaign about something in particular, we can analyse that data, and we will then know, because at the moment we tend to do blanket communications, we just send the same thing to everybody. But this data going forward will enable us to actually target our communication to specific groups of individuals, because we've also got where they live. So we can target it at certain groups of individuals because we know that they're not, for example, they may not have a predication to recycle. So rather than send out something blanket to everybody, we can actually target our activities in the areas where we need to. So I see it as being something that complements the work that we currently do, because we do our participation monitoring, and we know from what the crews tell us who recycles and who doesn't. You can see it. You can see when people don't recycle. It's not something that's hidden in the house. It's on the street. So we're just going to use it to complement what we're already doing, to make us a little bit smarter in terms of how we communicate with people. I can't really give a specific time frame, because I see this being an extra tool that we can use ongoing forever. So we're always going to have, through every year, we'll have systematic communication going out, but then we'll also have specific campaigns that will run, and we will do that flexing to whatever need there is in the borough at the time. So for me, it's not a case of we'll do it January to June. For me, it's a case that we'll start using it and we'll always use it. So there's no definitive time frame. It's more a case of ongoing.
I hadn't caught the Experian thing, because I went on the Experian course, and it was really, really interesting. There's about 100 more things. But you, having done the Secret Shopper with you, you've got your own sort of hunches, haven't you? Because you and Mr. Osman and a few of you go out there, and you've got a good idea of different wards and different fields for them. So you find the Experian targeting practice, your hunches, and probably the others, they work together, do they?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That was the point I was just making. It'll complement what we currently do. Yeah. We know, as I said, we know anecdotally from what the crews tell us, we know areas that don't recycle as well as others. We know areas that will recycle very well. We can, certain days of the week, we know that there'll be more glass, and in certain areas there might be more tins. We know these things about, because you can tell a lot about an area by what people put out in their black box. So we've already got that anecdotally from the crews, and also from our participation monitoring. So we go out 3 or 4 times a year, as you know, because it's reported through the performance system. We go out, and on the front end as well, we go out and we actually check areas to see, well, how well is this area using our curbside service. So you're absolutely right. This new data will enable us to be more targeted and just to be able to do it a bit smarter rather than a blanket approach which we've always used in the past.
I will say one thing, Chair, because I've obviously got some experience in this, having done it in other places for things like Friends of the Earth. But your experience of that is reasonable, because I only did it with glass and paper years ago, but you do get a kind of feel for it. But that experience stuff is really quite interesting. I think as a development, so you're going to be able to get a sort of gradation all around the borough where you think things could be, and then targeting. I suspect members, actually council members, the ones that go out and look at places, would be quite a useful thing to bring in there as well. There might be other ways in which you can pull in pockets, because I know what you did in the southwest in our area, where you were doing areas where you had very active groups of people in each area, and that's something for people when they look around their own area. You've got groups of people who are very, very active, and you showed me in one street, and I won't mention where it is because we're on air, but they've got one bit of a street where they're very active recycling, another bit of a street, and it's very striking, as you showed me on that, and then you've got some people that don't bother recycling at all within the same area.
It's just going to be a really good handy tool which will complement all the other methods that you've got, and hopefully bring targets. Right, moving on to referenced in point 29 of the WAO review document, states that the Council are developing an education and an awareness strategy to increase recycling rates with an anticipated rollout of autumn 2015. Has this document been published? If not, when's it going to be completed?
It hasn't been published, and there was also a mention in the WA report about a lack of resources, and I'm afraid that this just bears true, really. We've just not had the capacity to be able to do that because of the skinny bin rollout. And actually, we now think that rather than having a standalone policy around education awareness, it really ought to form part of the wider strategy. So it'll be rolled into the wider strategy, which is why I think we've covered that off to say that it'll be part of that.
Why? I just get very passionate about this, because I mean, you know, I've been around this a long time. We need to be working with community councils, because a lot of them have been doing a lot of work over the last 20 years that I've been a community councillor. With schools, we've got the green flag schools, we've got a whole lot of things. I mean, somewhere along the lines, we need to grab, if we can, an officer in education or someone. I'm looking at Duncan now. We need to sit this one together, because there's a bit of joined up thinking it needs on. It's not just about waste, is it? It's about something else. You're part of a story with other aspects, with the action plan on active, all the rest of it, cycling and the rest, all the things together. I think there's a big story that could go into schools, into community on this. Maybe it needs a bigger issue than that. I remember 20 years ago when I started as a community council, there was a lot of work on that. Maybe there's just a much bigger thing, which waste is a very big part. Composting, getting people going, a whole lot of things. There's a lot of issues in this. Would you agree on that?
I do agree, and just for clarity, what I'm talking about, what they're talking about in paragraph 29 is a written document. Yes. But we're already doing all the activities. It's not that we're not doing them. We've got Teresa Pearce, who actually performs that function. Yeah. So she works very actively with schools. She's in and out of schools. It's not just around waste, it's around litter. And it's part of the, I forget what they call it now, but it's part of the social well-being part of the curriculum. So she goes in and she runs. We had a whole series in the summer of the Gregory Brothers. We got funding for that, grant funding. They came down and ran a number of plays in all of our schools, talking about litter, talking about waste, recycling, environmental issues, effectively. So we're already doing all of those things. We're already doing it. What paragraph 29 was talking about was we don't write it down. We haven't written down a strategy that says this is how we do it and this is how we're going to do it going forward. So I think we need to be clear. We haven't written a physical strategy. We don't have a glossy document that says this is what we do, but we are doing it anyway. So it is happening. We just haven't written it down.
I know WAO said that we need to shape and own the strategy from the start, and participant Cymru and Denbighshire have some good models of practice as well, so it might be worthwhile speaking to those.
All I'm saying is that joined up thinking suggests that you do it with schools, the community councils and everyone else as well, and it shouldn't cost, because there's a lot of them, we're just not all doing it together. And I'm not criticising because I know you do all this stuff, but there's a lot of people spending a lot of money in different silos on this one, and they've been doing it for the last 20 years. It's ridiculous.
Okay, right, we'll move on to the last proposal 9 then. How many risks in the Council's risk register relate to waste? What are they and what level of risk are they?
Testing me now, and I actually had that information on my desk this morning. I didn't bring it with me. Okay, so there's a corporate risk, and we've just recently changed these, so maybe Kath can help me. There's a service risk. There's a risk around failure to award a contract for long-term our long-term contracts. So if we fail to award a contract, there is a risk there that we can't treat our waste. There's a risk around that. There's a risk around, you can bail me out in a minute, there's a risk around failing to meet our targets, because obviously we've got statutory recycling targets, and if we fail to meet those targets, then we incur substantial fines.
That's it.
Oh,
don't panic. Since the review, there's only 2 on waste. I've got them in front of me. Do you want me to? Yeah.
Reviewed them since, yeah.
Yes.
Sorry. Yeah. That's it.
What's the risk cost?
Well, the risk of not meeting our targets is around about 100 grand per % we miss it. So that's the cost. We know that. So this year's target is 58%.
I'm running at 57.34 of my last performance, but I'm pretty sure it's gone above that.
It has, yeah. It has. 50. Well, at the end of Q2, this is unvalidated, but it was 57.81, so we're nearly there. And none of the skinny bin rollout is incorporated in that, so that's yet to feed through. So our target this year is 58. So we're there or thereabout. So say we only got 50%, then we'd be fined 800 grand. That would be the cost of that. Yeah. If very real. And with the contract issue, if we don't award a contract, I mean we currently have contracts, we operate legally. If we don't award another contract and we get to the end of our existing contracts, the risks are that we're potentially, as a council, operating ultra vires because we're operating without a contract. And of course, if you don't go to market and you don't test these things with a proper process, you could be spending more money than you need to on the contract that you've got. I can't really put a price on it for you, I'm afraid. That's not as easy. It's not quite as clear cut as the fines. But we've put it as a risk. I think the medium. I want to say. Check me out. Medium. So they're medium risk, and I think what we've said is that they are low probability of happening, but there would be a significant implication if it happened. Am I right?
Should have brought the stars with us.
So what we're saying is, and I'm touching wood again now. So what I'm saying is that we think we will award a contract because we have a project in place and we're moving forward with it. We will award a contract, but you can never just assume that's going to happen. We have to assume that because there is a risk there. So that the likelihood of the risk is low, but if it did happen, then it would be quite a significant impact. Similarly, we think the likelihood of not hitting our target is low, but if it did, it's a significant amount of money. Even if 1% would be 100 grand, which I know doesn't sound as much as 800, but in the current financial climate.
Councillor Seaborn?
I think that's the end of the questions, but could I ask you, if you had a wish list, what would it be? I would like to see an incinerator. Quiet, Ashley, where we could burn all our waste, produce energy, put it back into the national grid, and we could make money for the council in that way.
Okay, so I was going to ask you the question, why do you want an incinerator? But I think you've answered that, because you've said you'd produce energy and put it into the grid. What I can say, yeah, Councillor Ashley's right, that's not necessary, that's not incineration. But what I would also say is that our new long-term residual contract does pretty much that. So we take our purple bin. No, it's not here. It was built in Cardiff, but it serves 10 local authorities. But it takes our residual waste, our purple bin waste, it pulls out whatever recycler it can. It then treats that through various processes, and that produces energy. And that energy does go back into the grid. So we are producing energy from it, and then whatever's left over that we then can't do any more with, it then goes into landfill. But the amount we put into landfill, as you know, is very, very low now. So, cool. That's a good question.
It's a good question.
It is a good question. I think my immediate wish list would be, and it's within our gift, and we've got plans to do it anyway, would be having enforcement policy in case we need it. I actually think there is something to be said for having legislation around recycling. So actually make it a legal requirement for people to recycle, because at the moment it's not. And I think that if there was legislation around that, that would help. My personal wish list, and not all of my colleagues would agree with me on this one, would be to stop packaging at source. Because I think if we could get to manufacturers and say to manufacturers, find a new way to do this, then it would actually prevent all of this waste getting into the streams that we then have to deal with at our cost. And that's a cost of the public purse at the end of the day. So I think that would be on my personal wish list, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much.
Right, well, I think...
I think that's a laudable, because the amount of waste is unbelievable. And if you look, the last nation in these islands to go over to pay for bags is England, and they've gone down, was it 88% on supermarket bags? It's unbelievable. Yeah, but they didn't want to do it by any shape or form.
No, we've been doing it for a long time, haven't we, before England? Yes. Right. So all's left then is to thank you both for coming, and just to let you know that Non commented on how happy that we had been making recommendations or working towards them. So thank you both for coming again. Okay.
Will you want me to send you a list of activities that go on within my ward for, possible roadshows and things?
Yeah, I'd be happy with that, but I think if it's in the minutes, then that gives all of committee an opportunity to do that, and maybe it's something that needs to go out more widely to all members.
I think all members should have, when we're developing the strategy, then just ask all members to just let you know what.
But it's also almost more targeted little roadshows, really, and we do get requests. We get requests. I can't think one off the top of my head. I can't think of one off the top of my head. But we do get requests from particular groups who will come to us and say, could you come and do a talk? And we're happy to do that. That's what the Waste to Winners officers are all about.
And I think anything to improve numbers, consultations, come back to you, that would be really helpful.
If we're talking about wish list, the one thing I would like back, because every allotmenter in the borough would like, is the green waste back the other way.
Well, we have plans around that. So with the contractor that we have running the Household Waste Recycling Centre, and going forward when we have our new green contract, what we'd like to be able to do is the green waste, or what we plan to do, it's not what we'd like to do, it's on our plan, and it'll be in the waste strategy, is that we want to be able to take the green waste that's sent off for treatment and is turned into compost material, and then sell that on the Household Waste Recycling Centre. I can't give you, £1 a bag, £2 a bag. It would have to be at a rate that was commercial. but sell it at the House of Waste Recycling Centre. So the green material that people are giving us, they can then buy back as compost. So we have got plans to do it. It is on our list of things to do. It's just timing and getting it running, really.
Would there be allotment as bulk rate at all? Worth asking, because the community farms very hard pressed to keep us up with us lot, and this would be great for mitigation of rain, you see, because we need a lot of it.
Yeah.
You can take that forward when the time comes, Stuart, and declare an interest at the same time. Right, again, thank you very much for coming, and we will see you soon. Yeah. Bye. Right, shall we ask you, Catherine, to go forward with the recommendations?
Thanks, members. If I just remind you then of the suggested scrutiny activity before we start. The committee is asked to scrutinise what arrangements the councils have in place to address the recommendations made in the WAO report, Service Assessment of Waste Management Services. So, do you think that they have appropriate arrangements in place to put together actions for the recommendations made by the WAO is the first question. Are you all in agreement that they have? Yeah, and obviously Non Jenkins and Chris Pugh both commented that, you know, a year's gone by since the report was written. In that time, a lot has been done, and that they are quite happy with the progress being made, that there are either recommendations being addressed or in the process of being addressed. So I think overall you can agree that as a start. Yeah? Okay. If we move on to recommendations then, obviously the information that Chris has said he will send to us for best practice and that sort of thing, we'll pass on. As soon as I receive it, we'll pass on. So whether or not you want to put a recommendation in there that when they're working towards implementing their waste strategy, that they use the signposts provided for them by WAO as a start.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. It went very quiet then, and I was a little bit... that's all right, I don't mind you having some thinking time. Okay, the next one then I've got is when we're talking about the service standards report to the public. And as Dana said to you, she's been working on that since our last meeting on the 16th of September. It's in place. I've actually got a copy of it on my computer to send out to you all today. They've missed the December Turbine Talks, so it is going to go out in the February Turbine Talks and obviously be signposted electronically on the web and through social media. But Councillor Owen mentioned that it may be beneficial to post something out with the council tax reminder letters. They obviously go to every address. You know, at that point of time, you know, members of the public will be able to see some of the things that their council tax money actually goes towards. Yeah. Yeah, it's very much saying, we said we would do this, this is how we performed, you said you would do this is how you've helped us. That's the sort of document that's in place. So are you happy for that to go forward as a recommendation? The other thing is that you think in relation to that and to other things when pulling together the waste strategy as a whole, that they need to work with as many community groups, RSLs, etc., as possible to ensure that everyone gets the opportunity to be consulted on and work with.
If I could just say that, Chair, I know that the roadshows are good, but they're held in places, you know, in large supermarkets within town centres that most residents don't go to, you know, especially the elderly, and they are missing out on a lot, you know, of information. So if they could be brought locally within the communities, I think that would be a lot.
And when we look, the figures were not great. They did 38 roadshows, but still there's a lack. So we need to do as much as we can and get in touch with as many people as we can.
I say that what they need to do, which might not be as obvious as taking it down to young people, youth centres, etc., because young people need to get them before they become and go up the system. Young schools, youth centres, CCYP, those sort of places. and work up the system, because they're naturally there and they get quite angry about it.
So it's approaching young and old, as
Yeah.
many community
and the
groups
older,
as
going a bit in
possible,
the middle will get there.
and
There's a lot of
multi-agencies as
Yeah.
well, RSLs, community groups.
It's also
Yeah.
a lot.
Right, I haven't got anything else
I've got-
formally documented as a recommendation.
There is one I've got, because...
Do you want me to finish this first and then you come up with one? Okay. It was in relation to the education and awareness strategy, and I thought it might be. As Dana said, they don't have a formal written document, although they are carrying out activities. You know, it's quite obvious that they need to incorporate that as part of their waste document. But I'd like to draw your attention to one of the comments that were made by the WAO invitees today, and it was that members of the public need to own and shape the strategy from the start. Obviously, we mentioned that today, but to ensure that as part of the recommendations, any work that's done forming those two strategies, that there is engagement with the public along the way. Do you think that covers it?
Can I say that the answer to the education strategy is to look at the how do you do it? They need to gather evidence from the community to take it forward, so it becomes. In some way, you see, they're teaching this stuff in schools and colleges, and they need to take it forward to the community so it becomes relevant to the community from where it's already done. A lot of this stuff is also sat in the middle of the Wellbeing and Future Generations Act, so it needs to become relevant to the whole community for the next 40 years, if you look at it part of that. So it's not just something for the operational side, it's something, and that's the bit that's missing. They need to do some work on it as well. They've got an office there. It's not just underpinning operation. It's the stuff, the medium term and the long term, which is what the Future Generations Act is all about. I'm sorry, they need to do more work on it.
Okay. Any more, Catherine?
Nothing else from me. Is there anything anyone feels that I've missed or would like to bring up at this point?
No, I'm quite happy. Everyone happy with the recommendations? Right? No? All happy with those? Okay. All right then, we move on to agenda item 6, the item for next meeting. Right, we've got to look at, we're going to bring Catherine in again.
Okay, thanks members. Normally at this stage of the meeting we bring in the Chief Officer to talk about the next item that's going to be discussed in the meeting. Since our September meeting and up until today, I've had many discussions with Duncan, and the feeling was that some of the items that were in the basket of items from Visioning wouldn't necessarily be ready to look at in our January meeting due to the fact that they're things that are ongoing. But we have got another suggestion, and every year, as you know, you as members look at the recommendations that have been made by yourselves as a committee going back over the past years. So last year was the first time we did it, and we looked at it for the year 14-15. What we're proposing is on January the 13th that we bring a report here with a progress and impact report from Duncan and his team, and they will look at each of the recommendations that have been accepted over the 14-15 and 15-16 year. They'll give you a progress update and the impact that's been made of each of the recommendations you've made. That gives you then the opportunity to ensure that they are working on the recommendations and acting upon them appropriately. I've spoken to the Chair during the last few weeks. She's happy to do that, and Duncan's happy for all of his heads of service to be available on that day. So that's the meeting that we'll be looking at then, and then our next meeting will be March the 9th, looking at the review of street scene.
Yeah. Everyone happy with that? Yeah? And you're all okay for 13th of January? Yes? Right, that's all leaves us to do. Say thank you very much. And that's the end of the meeting. Have a nice Christmas. See you in the new year.
Tomorrow, isn't it?